I hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. This is probably the last video that I'm going to send for this class, given that it's the last week of class. And I just wanted to say thank you to everyone in this class for your participation, for your discussion board posts, your emails. I really did enjoy getting to know you all. And please stay in touch. I'm interested in seeing how you all do in the MBA program, and then of course throughout your careers. You've got my email address. I'm also on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to me and stay in touch. Also encourage you to reach out to the other classmates and stay in touch with them. As I mentioned at the beginning of this class, I think the network that you'll develop in the MBA program is perhaps one of the most important things that you'll get out of the degree. So please take advantage of that. Some announcements. We are done with Connect homework assignments. The last one was due last night, so there are no more Connect homework assignments. This week, there is the final exam. It has already been posted. You can click on it from the announcements page. You can click on it within the Module 7 learning module. There's a link at the bottom of the page where you can click on the link there. As a reminder, it's going to be a 2-hour exam. It will be timed, and so when you start, you will have 2 hours to complete it. As I found out during the last exam, apparently Blackboard will time out if you are in there for more than 3 or 4 hours. I forget which. So that doesn't happen when you take the final exam. Please log out of Blackboard and then start a new session. So log in fresh. So basically the time is reset, so that way you won't get kicked out during the final exam. And the final exam is just going to cover the topics that we discussed in modules 5, 6, and 7. And you'll have until this Friday to complete the final exam. So if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email, and happy to discuss. So this week, the only thing that you have to do is the final exam, and there is one discussion board post. There is not a response post. Just ask a couple questions to you all. What did you learn most from this course? What do you plan to implement as a manager? And then tell me some feedback about this course. I do want to make changes and make improvements. I've already gotten some feedback from Cell Review about things that can be improved. And while I know you won't necessarily be the beneficiary, be nice to your fellow classmates who are going to be taking the class in the future. I will modify the class based on your feedback. So feedback, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whatever it is, please let me know. I will read it and take it into account. As far as the discussion board posts have gone, I'll make some comments on discussion board 6. We are probably about halfway through grading discussion board 5. So we're a little bit behind, to be honest, just because of the holidays, and it's been hard to really catch up because there are actually more students enrolled in this class than I originally thought. So it's taken me a little bit more time. But there haven't really been any issues with the discussion board posts. I think recently in the last several discussion board posts, I don't think anybody's gotten less than a B. So ever since the first one, I think you all have done a great job with the discussion board post there. But I do want to make several comments on discussion board post 6. In particular, I was asking you the question of, during a recession, and imagine yourself as the CEO or manager of a firm, what would you do in terms of having to cut wages or having to cut employees? So the reason I ask this question is because during a recessionary period, it's somewhat of an anomaly that we actually have really high unemployment rates. And so if you think that wages are flexible and should be able to adjust downward because of a drop in profits, then there really shouldn't be very high unemployment rates. So, for example, if for whatever reason, people are no longer buying homes and profits of corporations have dropped, you would expect wages to drop in response, and so that the wages adjust to make sure that there's still relatively full levels of unemployment. And yet we don't see that the case. We still see these really high levels of unemployment during the last recessionary period. And the question is why? Shouldn't in labor markets wages adjust to match supply and demand? Because we know wages are really just prices. They're prices for labor in a market. So there's a lot of debate in the economics profession about why this is, and a lot of it has to do with the theory of what we call sticky prices or sticky wages. And that is that wages themselves actually don't really adjust that much during a period of recession. when output drops, you would think that wages should drop in response, and that some of these lower profits should be passed on to workers in the forms of lower wages, and yet that's not necessarily true. What tends to happen is that either workers get laid off, and the rest of the wages stay the same, or prices increase. And so, as a result of these lower profits, sometimes companies will try to increase prices, but of course that can also perpetuate the recessionary period as well. So when I asked you what would you do in the case of a recessionary period, I was trying to tease out this phenomenon of sticky wages and whether or not wages actually adjust downward. And several of you made some great comments. Sam Wines talked about orchestras, how they're somewhat unique in that they have multi-year contracts. So she made the point that in these contracts of 2 to 4 years, that if we go through a recessionary downturn, the company really can't adjust the wages downward because there's a legal contract in place. And so the wages might adjust at the end of the contract period. And indeed, there's often a lot of discussion and debate, even some strikes that might occur. But during the period of the contract, those wages can actually adjust downward regardless of what's going on in the economy. And that structure is not unique to orchestras. In fact, I have a contract at the University of Cincinnati. I'm currently under a 3-year contract, and during the period of this time, my salary is fixed at a certain level with certain increases every year. But there's a legal contract that my wages actually cannot adjust as a result of changes in the economy. And so what tends to happen is that people just don't get hired. So the university might not hire as many faculty as there were before, leading to higher levels of unemployment. Then I asked you the discussion of if you're a manager, whether or not you would fire employees sort of all at once, or you would make these changes incrementally over the course of a year. And Kelsey Hayes responded that there is this appeal of ripping off the Band-Aid and doing the pain all at once. Nobody wants to go to work with this, this threat of being laid off hanging over their heads. And so there is this philosophy that if you're going to do it, you make the cuts all at once. And so you sort of rip off the Band-Aid, in her words. And I think there is some intuitive appeal to that approach, and there's a reason why some folks do it. Several of you commented that might not have been the right approach because you might tend to overcut and maybe you make mistakes in your hiring. And so by doing some incremental fires, there's a bit of a trial and error going on, and you make sure that you don't cut too much. And I think Amy Porter made the comment that if you made the decisions all at once, not only would the morale of the company be shot, but you might cause you might cut too many jobs, and you might accidentally just shoot yourself in the foot. So I thought that was a great discussion about how you might do it. I think it really depends on the trust that exists between a manager and its employees as to whether or not you do this all at once or do the firings incrementally. And morale is very important because once a person is in an environment where there's a threat of layoffs, and I've worked in those environments at Cincinnati Bell when they were going through a period of firing people. It's a very tense time. It's not pleasant. Morale is really low. And, at Cincinnati Bell, they tended to make the adjustments all at once to eliminate that. So I understand the rationale for spacing it out because you might make sure that you do it appropriately and don't cut too much. But there's good arguments to be made for both sides. A couple of you made some good suggestions about it's not just cutting wages or cutting workers. You might consider other alternatives, other forms of compensation. So David Berge, I think that's pronounced correctly, said he would offer a voluntary reduction of hours to employees. So there might be some people in your firm who would be willing to work less hours because of childcare, or they want to spend more time with their family, or they want to pursue other hobbies. And so you might actually just ask people, would you be willing to work fewer hours, or even take a voluntary furlough? And I thought that was a great insight in that compensation is not just about wages and employment, it's about all these other benefits, and there might be room to make adjustments at the margin there. So the last comment was made by Elizabeth Fox, who said, when you do cut workers, though, and lay them off, typically you lay off the most unproductive ones first. And the question I had, and which is true, when you're going through layoffs, you look at the productivity, and it's certainly not the case that you would cut your most productive workers. You tend to cut the least productive ones immediately. And in fact, if you look at the productivity numbers during the recessionary period, productivity didn't drop near to the extent of employment levels. So the percentage drop in employment was much greater than the percentage drop in productivity because firms were actually cutting their least productive employees first. The question is, if you already have these least productive employees to begin with, why weren't they let go during the periods of plenty when times were good? And I think that really leads to another discussion that we don't have time to cover in this class, but it's around what in economics we call the principal agent problem. So when times are good, managers aren't just motivated by money. And if any of you are managers, you understand this as well. You also get satisfaction for managing people. You want people to like you, and it's painful to have those conversations and let people go. I've done it before, and it makes for a terrible day. No one enjoys laying people off. And if you can avoid it, I think most people would rather not have that conversation and let somebody go. And so the reason why some of these less productive employees might continue to exist when times are good really deals with the fact that managers don't face the same incentives that the principals or owners do. So the shareholders are only concerned about the financial return in their investment. They don't necessarily care about the work environment, only to the extent that it perhaps makes them more money. But managers are different, right? So a manager acts as an agent for the owners, and so they face different incentives. And as a result, one of the reasons why you might see these less productive workers continue to be employed during times of good is because of this principal agent problem, right? The incentives of the owner and the manager aren't always in perfect alignment. It's a great topic of conversation. I actually think I might, in the next time I teach this class, talk about that because I think it's an important concept. But I did want to bring that up in the context of this discussion board post of why that might occur. So I think that's all I wanted to talk about for this week. Just as a reminder to summarize, the final exam is 2 hours and it is due this Friday, and you have a discussion board post. So please do not forget to do those 2 topics. I wish all of you well. I hope you have a great Christmas holiday and that you enjoy the rest of your time in the MBA program.